Hello, everyone. A very good morning, a very good afternoon. First things first, thank you very much for setting some time apart amidst your busy schedule and joining us here for this webinar. I hope the next 30 to 45 minutes or something beyond that will be much more informative for you and useful so that you will feel that the time spent in this webinar was fruitful. A quick introduction about myself. My name is Vivin Satyan, and I've been working as a technical consultant or technical evangelist for the Active Directory team of ManageEngine for over 7 years now. And this is my picture, handsome brown bald guy right there. So I've been working as a technical consultant. Now, what I do here is I do two things. One is I actually implement some of the Active Directory products in organizations of various sizes, small, medium, and large businesses. So I get to know some of the challenges that administrators face during Active Directory management or Active Directory auditing. The second thing that I do is I do a bit of field work, which means I get to travel the world. Last year, I was fortunate enough to travel to 28 countries. And then what does that mean to you is I get to actually talk to administrators and know some of their problems, as I mentioned earlier. So let's take an example here. So if an administrator in Australia has a problem pertaining to managing Active Directory or structuring Active Directory or getting his or her folder permissions right or cleaning up Active Directory for that matter, which means the same problem can be there for another administrator who's based in the UK or somewhere in Saudi Arabia or in somewhere in the Middle East or in Australia. So the point that I'm trying to get is the technology is common, so the problem should be common too. So what I've done here is I've created a slide deck with keeping in mind those common challenges that administrators face and how do we, ManageEngine, offer a solution for those challenges, because there's no point in just talking about problems without offering solutions. So this is going to be a problem solution approach kind of a webinar, and the duration is going to be for 45 minutes. All right, the agenda for the session is going to be, I'd like to start off with a basic topic here. The agenda is I'm going to discuss about 4 topics pertaining to Active Directory management. I understand that most of you who have joined this webinar are administrators of some sort, or help technicians or IT directors. So you belong to various verticals and you have different job responsibilities inside of your organization. And similarly, you have different job responsibilities inside of Active Directory. So I am going to be talking about 4 common areas of Active Directory, which every administrator, every IT technician will be interested in structuring. Okay. First one is I'm going to be talking about how do you bring in standardization. Let me give you an example here. Okay, when I actually go in for implementations in certain companies or certain organizations belonging to different verticals, I notice that the Active Directory is not that structured. Okay, why do I want the Active Directory to be a bit structured? Benefit number 1, it becomes very easy for you to manage Active Directory when it is structured, when all your users have same naming formats, when the right department has right permissions, when your folders are in place, so on and so forth. So it becomes very important, and it is very useful for you to structure your Active Directory infrastructure. So how do we bring in standardization and thereby structure your Active Directory infrastructure? I'm talking about your users, computers, groups, so on and so forth. And the second thing, as administrators, we all do is we do reports. And the whole idea of we doing reports is we need to understand what is going on inside of Active Directory, so we do reports. I'm going to be talking about some important queries that can be used in any organization of any size. All right. So we're going to be discussing about 4 important reports that you need to generate, and I'll also let you know why you should be generating those reports, the security aspect to it. And it's all about automation nowadays. I'm not saying it's 100% automation, but people are getting there. So when you have something going on a day-to-day basis, let's say you create users, you manage them, you give them access to certain folders, and you give them access for 90 minutes a day or a week, and then you revoke access. All these things are going to be quite common on a day-to-day basis. So when you have something happening on a daily basis, why not automate the process? So we're going to be discussing about a few automation cases here, the things that you can automate in Active Directory for better efficiency. And last but not the least, in fact, I would say this is the most important task or the point that I'm going to be discussing, which is delegation. Okay, Active Directory is no longer just about the administrator. So you have your HR initiating the user creation process. So whenever new employees are recruited to your organization, you have your HR filling out basic details in a web application and then forwarding it to you. And then you as technicians or administrators, you provision the accounts in Active Directory with the right groups, Exchange mailboxes, Office 365 accounts with the right licenses, so on and so forth. Now, all this boils down to one topic, which is delegation. An administrator delegating control to a non-administrator, right? So when you say delegation with the Microsoft model in place is kind of intrusive. Now, what do I mean by intrusive? When you add a user to a group in Active Directory, you are increasing the user's right in Active Directory. And also, when you're using the delegation of control wizard, you are in turn elevating the user's right in Active Directory. Don't get me wrong. Let me make one thing very clear here. Administrators can have all the access they want inside of Active Directory because they have the keys to your kingdom. That is understandable. But why does a HR need access in Active Directory for doing basic stuff? Why does a help desk technician need access in Active Directory for resetting password and unlocking accounts? So how do you cut down inappropriate elevation of rights or keeping the elevated rights to a bare minimum? How do you delegate non-intrusively and get things done? Okay, so these are the 4 topics that we'll be covering for the next 30 to 45 minutes. Now, what do we have to perform these actions? Microsoft has given us some tools, which is the native tools, and we have third-party applications like the one from Manage Engine. What are the tools that Microsoft has given us? Microsoft has given us its most favorite and most powerful tool right here, PowerShell. We have Active Directory users on computers. Some of you have Office 365 either in a hybrid mode or completely cloud, so you would be familiar with the Admin Center. This is the first time that Microsoft thought, no, we need to come up with a graphical user interface for administrators to see what is going on. So Microsoft did not have a graphical user interface for Active Directory. It had just the Active Directory users on computers console. And if you had Exchange, you had the Exchange Management Console too. And if you had Sky for Business, there was another console. But none of these consoles gave you in-depth reporting. But Admin Center, I'm not saying it gives you in-depth reporting, but it does a better job than the legacy tools that we're talking about. And in order to audit, in order for you to know what is going on, who, what, when, and where inside of Active Directory, you have Event Viewer, specifically the security logs of the Event Viewer. So all these are the tools from Microsoft, but there's a problem. I'm not trying to belittle Microsoft, or I'm not trying to belittle the tools from Microsoft here. All I'm saying is there are certain obvious challenges with the tools that Microsoft has given us with regards to Active Directory management. And what are those challenges? Number 1, the confirmation messages that you get with regards to failures aren't very helpful. Let me give you a basic example here. Okay, I'm quickly going to move on to my lab setup here, and let's say, okay, I'm trying to create new AD users in Active Directory. Okay, I just want you to watch this here for a minute. This is a sample script for creating user accounts in Active Directory, which Microsoft has been has in place for the last 16, 17 years, and nothing has changed. It does not have Exchange. It does not have Office 365. Just basic user creation script. Okay. Now let's say I managed to write a script. Okay, this is just an example, and I actually write a script. And the script actually creates, the script is supposed to create 5 user accounts in Active Directory. 4 of them get created fine. 1 user account failed for some reason, okay? Now, the script that I use is not going to give me the exact reason for failure, okay? It does not tell me which parameter failed. It does not tell me what is the right syntax. So all it says is something in red. If I just try to read, it says the operator is reserved for future use, so on and so forth. It does not give me the exact reason for. I'm not saying that the script that I ran was a perfect one. It was just an example. A sample script. But even if you try to run an actual script, and it failed for some reason, okay? I'm not saying 100% failure. Let's say 4 users created, 1 user failed. The confirmation messages for failure aren't very helpful. Okay. So that's one problem that I see in most of the installations. And then consolidating information from multiple native tools, okay? So you have these many tools that we are talking about. So in order for you to actually find out what's going on inside of Office 365 or Active Directory or let's say your Exchange, you need to target a user who's in Active Directory, and you need to map that specific user account in Exchange and get a report from here. And if you're running a hybrid setup, you'll have to run a report from the admin center. So consolidating information from multiple native tools is a challenge. The last part then comes the part of ability to delegate to non-admin users. That's going to be even more challenging. Okay, when administrators find the first two tasks a bit challenging at times, now think about delegating this to a non-admins. Okay, let me give you a classic example. You give a PowerShell script to a help desk technician for, let's say, creating a linked mailbox for a user account, and the technician changes a specific parameter in a script, and instead of creating the user account, a linked mailbox for the user account, it could disable the account in Active Directory if the parameter is not mentioned right. Okay, so when you have complex technologies and you're trying to delegate them to non-admin users for getting things done in Active Directory, which is the case nowadays, it becomes a bit of a problem, and it is time consuming as well. So what is the alternative? Now, how do you give your HR, your help desk technicians, your administrators just enough access inside of Active Directory? Nothing more, nothing less. And how do you get all the things done inside of Active Directory without altering the permissions? That's when we have a tool like ADManager Plus. So the tool is a web application. Okay, it's going to talk to your Active Directory from your laptop, and then you'll be able to manage your Active Directory infrastructure. So that's about the application as such. Now let's get into the actual problems and solutions. Okay, first thing is I told you that I'm going to be talking about bringing in standardization. Okay, now if you take an object, any object inside of Active Directory, it can be a user, group, computer, or contact, it can be a group policy. Any object inside of Active Directory has to go through three phases. It has to be created, it has to be modified or managed, and once the use is done, it has to be deleted. And if it's an accidental deletion, there has to be a recycle feature. But these three are the mandatory phases that any object needs to go through inside of Active Directory. You create users, you modify their permissions, reset password, unlock account, and then once they leave your organization, you delete the account inside of Active Directory. So how do you bring in standardization in all three phases? Okay, let's start with creation. I'm just going to be talking about creation here. You can apply my principle for modification and deletion too. Okay, now creation. How do you bring in standardization? How do you make sure that all your users have same naming formats? I have seen certain organizations have different naming formats for different departments. Okay, and I've also seen that when you create an administrator account inside of Active Directory, let's call the administrator, okay, Mr. X. Okay, the administrator is X. So when I actually create an Active Directory account, I don't create one account for X, I create two accounts. Okay, if X is an admin, I create two accounts for X. One will be a regular account which can log in to laptops. Mr. X can log into laptop with the regular account that I create inside of Active Directory. Now that X is an administrator, I create an admin account for X. I might name it admin X. Okay, and I give that admin X account the right to log on to my servers. Okay, the whole idea of me doing this is I don't want my PC accounts to be logging into confidential servers, and I don't want my admin accounts to be logging into laptops. Okay, pass the hash, crypto locking. You can just think of any attack pattern that you have in place to retrieve passwords. So to keep things even more simple, I have two accounts, one for logging into the PC, which is not supposed to be logging into my servers, and the other one for logging into my servers and not to my PC, right? Now, how do you bring in all these standardizations? Now, that's when we thought, why not come up with a framework, okay? We call this framework the template. Now, this template that we have inside of ADManager Plus is going to bring in standardization while you create user accounts in Active Directory. Let me dive right into the template and show you what are the things that we can do with regards to standardization. Okay. Now, this is ADManager Plus. I log into ADManager Plus. Okay, I was talking about templates and how templates can bring in standardization. So the templates are right under the AD Management tab. Okay, as you can see, the application can retrieve information from Active Directory from the Reports tab. It also can manage Office 365, help you delegate, and also automate stuff inside of Active Directory. We'll be talking about all that, but now I go to ADMGMT, templates or framework for bringing in standardization. So I've already created a template. I'm going to quickly open that up for you. Now this is the layout. Okay, so this is my IT users template. I can create one template per department, one for IT, one for sales, one for marketing, one for offshore users, and then I can give it a description for better understanding of what the template maps to. And if you have a look at the layout right here, now you have various tabs: general, account, contact, exchange. Now these are the exact tabs that you would see for a user account inside of Active Directory. And not just that, now this does not have Exchange, this does not have Office 365, this does not have Skype for Business or G Suite inside here. But if you just have a look at the layout, this layout has Exchange, you have Office 365, you have G Suite, you have Link, Skype for Business or OCS here, remote mailbox, and whatnot. So this layout, okay, can help you create multiple accounts inside of Active Directory. So this is how the layout looks. Now, how do we bring in standardization? One, through naming formats. I would recommend that you have a specific naming format for per department or or for the entire organization. Now, the naming format that I have created, it would go something like this. So the name of my domain is vcorp, and I've created an IT technician format. It would look something like this. If the first name of the user is John and the last name is Smith, the naming format that I have created will be something like firstname.lastname@domain.com. Now, if you want a different naming format, you can just pick and choose any format from here, or you can always create your own naming format like the ones that I've done. I've created an admin accounts format. So for every admin account that I create inside of Active Directory, all I need to do is just switch to this format, and the rest of the fields get auto-populated. All right. Now, this is one way of bringing in standardization. I can even create my own naming format if you have any specific custom format to be applied for your users. All right. Now, the second way by which you can bring in standardization is by copying user attributes. Okay. So let's say you're trying to build a template, brand new template for the IT department. So you go to copy users. Let's say you pick the IT user here. So let's have IT HTT. Now this technician belongs to the IT group. So now I hit select attributes after choosing the technician. This is where I get to choose or copy the attributes that I want. So I have a perfect account here from which I can copy the attributes from. Okay. So this is going to me, after copying all the attributes, I just hit apply. Now when I hit apply, all the attributes get pasted onto this template. So building a template becomes very easy here. So I have copied everything that I want. Now the next thing that I can do here is I can create something called smart logic. Okay. So the logic that I have created here is, if you take a look at this rule that I've created, if the department is IT, information technology, I want the user to be a member of certain groups. I want the logon name to be in a different format. I want the home folder to be set for the users like this. And I want the container to be a specific container that I choose from. And I want the office field to be populated as Tokyo. Now, you can very well add any rule that you want so that when your users, actually, if I just go back to the layout view here, if I just type in the first name, last name, and maybe the department of the user account, The rest of the fields get auto-populated. All right. When I say the rest of the fields, that includes Exchange, okay? That includes your remote mailbox if you want. That includes your Skype and also your Office 365, okay? So this is how you can create standardization or bring in standardization. The last thing about the template is, now if you delegate user creation to your HR, do you think that your HR needs access to the Exchange tab, remote mailbox, and all this? Not at all. That's when we give you an option to tailor make the entire layout. So all the HR wants is maybe 5 or 6 fields: first name, last name, telephone number, title, department, and maybe manager, right? So how do you trim the entire layout and then give it to your technicians? Enable, drag, and drop, okay? When you hit enable, drag, and drop, the entire layout, as you can see here, becomes customizable. You can remove or add any field that you see here. When you delete a specific field, it falls in the field tray that you see on the left-hand side. And when you want that field back, just drag and drop it to the layout. You see this? Yeah. That's how customizable the layout is. Now, another important feature that I'd like to talk about here is, let's take this employee ID field, okay? Employee ID field is a non-mandatory attribute in Active Directory. Now, what that means is, if you delegate this template to your HR and say, hey, make sure the employee ID field is filled in when you actually initiate the user creation process. And if it's a non-mandatory field in Active Directory, the chances of your HR missing it out is very high because it's non-mandatory. Your HR can even complete the process without filling the employee ID attribute. Now, the only way Microsoft helps you to make a non-mandatory attribute as mandatory in Active Directory is by extending the schema, for which you'll have to be in the schema admins group. Now, we, on the other hand, using this layout, if you just hit edit in the employee ID attribute, you have something called mandatory here, read only, or none. So you set it to mandatory and then hit done, okay? Now, let's say the email, okay? You do not want your HR to deal with the email address format, so that you want to make it silently active after giving them values here, okay? So if I just maneuver the mouse over to silently active, what it says is, this hides the field from the user or the technician or the HR during user creation, but passes any value held by it to Active Directory. That's silently active, right? So if you have specified an email address format here and you want the value to be passed to Active Directory, you can even make it silently active. So the HR will not have visibility to this field, but when they hit create, the object will be created inside of Active Directory with the exact attributes that you want. So you can make it mandatory by hitting edit, you can hit silent, make it silently active, or you can even make it read only by hitting the edit again, okay? So these are the things that you can do with the template inside of ADManager Plus. Now, template creation is the core for ADManager Plus. Now, after you've created the template, what are the things that you can do? You can create one user at a time, or go ahead and automate the process. So you can automate the process something like this. So you want 5 user accounts to be created next Wednesday at 9 in the morning, even before you step into office. Go to automation, open up create users here, tell the application to create users, pick and choose the template to be applied. If all of them are being recruited for the IT department or for, let's say, any department, you can just specify it in the CSV file and then set it to any time period that you want. So I want this automation to be run weekly, every week, Tuesday at 10:40 in the morning. I just hit save and then I sit back and relax, okay? Now, if you want the application to not create accounts in Active Directory directly, instead you want the automation to raise a request to you and you can just approve it, just select the checkbox besides an automation process here, okay? So with the template in place, the template is the base of standardization, okay? With the template in place, you can manually create accounts one after the other or automate the process in a controlled manner, right? And this is how the process would look like. You have new employees joining your organization. The user details is in the CSV or in a web application or in a network path or in your SQL or Oracle databases, or it can be in one of your HR application, okay? The input can be anything. So you give ADManager Plus the first name, last name, and the department of the new user who's about to join the organization. It will create Active Directory accounts in Active Directory. It will create Office 365 accounts with or without licenses. It's up to you. It will create an Exchange mailbox for the new user, and it's also capable of creating accounts in G Suite, which is Google Apps, right? Simply automate the process with the template and ADManager Plus. And what are the other applications that ADManager Plus can integrate with? If that's your question, it can integrate with any help desk tool out there in the market. So, for example, Service Desk Plus is a help desk offering from ManageEngine. So when ADManager Plus is integrated with Service Desk, the Service Desk screen or the layout gets additional Active Directory options that are bordered in red. Okay. So after the integration with ADManager Plus, if your help desk technician or if your HR, they log into the help desk tool for creating user accounts or in Active Directory or for raising a request, they get additional options here. All they have to do is just go to create users. The template will already be populated. Type in the first name and last name and then hit create. The account will be created in Active Directory. And they can also do 9 other operations apart from creating users. For example, reset the password, delete, disable, unlock, enable users, and also set folder permissions or group membership or manager or department attribute. Now, if you're using ServiceNow, the ServiceNow console will get additional Active Directory options after it integrates with ADManager. Now, what this achieves is your technicians, they don't actually log into a different tool. They actually log into their help desk tool, which they are used to logging in on a daily basis and perform the same operation. Okay. Now, for a lockout scenario, it would look something like this. A user account is locked out. Now, a ticket is raised to a technician. Now, the technician inside of ServiceNow resets the password. With the ServiceNow and ADManager Plus integration in place, the user account is unlocked, and if the password is if the password has to be reset, that is done as well. Okay, this is how things work, and it can also integrate with MySQL and Oracle databases. Now, your HR here, according to the diagram, whenever a new user joins the organization, the HR has a help desk tool or a form which they fill in, and that dumps in user information to MySQL and Oracle. Now, ADManager Plus can go to this SQL or Oracle database to the right table, read the user information, and then apply the template and automate the process of user creation, not just one user, but also users in bulk, and have the accounts created in Active Directory, and the users are all set to login. So this is how you empower your HR by integrating ADManager Plus with databases, with HR tools, and also if it's going to be a manual process, you can all give them any CSV file or a spreadsheet to go on with the process, right? Now that's about user creation and how do you bring in standardization. You can apply the same concept for modification. We have user modification templates, and also you can apply the process for user deletion as well. All right. So templates is the key to standardization. That's the point of my first topic. Now, the second topic here, I told you that I'd be giving you 4 important queries that any administrator should be generating inside of the Active Directory immediately. Okay. Now, these are action items. Action item 1, 2, 3, and 4. I just want you to try this right now, soon after the webinar, because this is not going to take you more than 2 minutes of your time, but this is worth knowing. Number 1, find out how many administrators do you have. Now, when I say how many administrators, please don't go to your Active Directory users and computers console and open up ADUC and then look for let's say let's go to these groups here. Don't go to enterprise admins, domain admins, schema admins, DNS admins, or other application or custom admin groups that you've created, and then have a look at the members and then say, I have 2, 3, 4, 5 members here inside of domain admin. So I have 5 admins. No, it's not going to work that way. We all know that, right? Because Microsoft has this concept called group nesting, right? So let me give you an example to better understand group nesting. If you open up a groups property, you have 2 tabs here, members and then member of, okay? Members means these are the direct members of the group. Member of means the schema admins group can be a member of another group inside of Active Directory. That's nesting, right? So let me give you a case for nesting so that you understand the situation a lot better. I have this help desk technician here. Okay, this technician is just supposed to do basic help desk actions. Okay, reset password, unlock account, just basic access. So if you just have a look at the properties of this user, I go to member of. So this technician can create users because he's part of the account creation security group, domain users, reset password and unlock account, do SQL basic access, and then VPN access. These are the actions that the technician can perform, right? Now I get an email notification from my application saying that this technician, helpdesk-us, has deleted 2 accounts in Active Directory. Now I have not given the helpdesk-us account the ability to delete users in Active Directory, but how has this technician managed to do so? That's the question, right? So I told you that a group in Active Directory can be part of another group, right? Now that information is not present here in this screen. Now if you are trying to have a look at the group membership of this user, helpdesk-us, and if you will rely on the information that you see in the member of tab, this is wrong, okay? This is not the complete group membership that the user is a member of. What if the VPN access group is in turn linked to domain admins, right? So this technician, who's only a direct member of VPN access, but also an indirect member of domain admins, is now a domain admin. And that is how this helpdesk-us account was able to delete 2 accounts in Active Directory, even though domain admins was not in the direct group members list, okay? But if you go to the VPN access group, which I'm going to do right now, so the VPN access group is right here. If I go to member of, you see domain admins. This is the problem. So if I ask you the basic question, how many administrators do you have? Always look at the nested groups too. Do not just rely on the direct groups. Please have a look at the nested groups too. Okay. Now let's investigate the group membership of this specific user account, the one that we were talking about. Okay. Helpdesk-us account. Now the Microsoft console tells me that the user is part of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups in Active Directory. Let's ask ADManager. So I go to reports, and then I go to groups for users. I select helpdesk-us account. Okay. I'm doing groups for this account. So ADManager told me, I'm sorry, Microsoft console told me that the user is part of 5 groups. Let's see what ADManager Plus has to return. Okay. Now it tells me this helpdesk-us account is not part of 5 groups, but it's part of 9 Active Directory security groups. How's that? Your VPN access group is in turn part of domain admins. Now domain admins is in turn a member of these 3 groups. And that is how 9 groups got added to the user account. So 5 direct groups plus domain admins, 6 plus these 3 groups. 6 plus 3 is 9, and that is how this user is a part of 9 groups, and that's how my helpdesk-us account was able to delete accounts in Active Directory. When you feel something is not right, just go ahead and select the groups, remove them from the groups right here, okay? So this is what I wanted to tell you. never go with just the direct group membership of the user account, because this is not the exact groups that a user is a member of. Always look for nested groups. Now, how do you see whether your top level groups are linked to some of the basic groups that you have inside of Active Directory? Let's say domain admins linked to a help desk group. How would you get to know all that, right? Because every Active Directory has two sets of groups: top level groups, basic groups, right? Now I want you to go to group report section, and then I want you to go to detailed group members, select the top level group that you want. I'm going to pick domain admins here. Okay, so let's do domain. Okay, I do this. I'm selecting domain admins here. Now I'm going to see whether my top level group is in turn linked to any other basic group in my Active Directory. Okay, so I'm going to have a look at the users that are linked to domain admins, the groups that are linked to domain admins, computers linked to domain admins, and also contacts linked to domain admins. Not just direct, but also nested. If you'd like to exclude nested, yes, just select this text box. Checkbox here. So I hit generate. So I'm going to see whether my domain admin, so top level group, is in turn linked to any other basic group inside of Active Directory. If I just go to groups, there you go, an alarm. So domain admins is in turn a member of VPN access group, or to put it in other words, VPN access group is in turn linked to domain admins. So any user who's going to be a member of VPN access will be an indirect member of domain admins too. You should know this. Please generate this query by selecting your top level groups inside of Active Directory, your administrators, your admin groups, your custom groups that you've created, right? Select these groups, generate the report, understand whether your top level groups are in turn linked to any of the basic groups inside of Active Directory. All right, that's done. Now, the second important query that I wanted to discuss with you is related to shared folders. Every Active Directory organization has some kind of shared folder. Now, the whole idea of having a shared folder is you want this folder to be accessible only by a specific group and no one else, right? I have one such shared folder, and now that I have shared folders, I do this exercise once in every 15 days. I pick my top 10 confidential folders and I check once in every 15 days whether the permissions are still the way I define them to be, right? So I do a right click on corp data. I go to properties. I wanted corp data to be accessible only by one security group, which is the finance manager security group inside of Active Directory. So I go to security in order to see that I have finance managers here. Yes, finance managers is still there. Do you notice a problem in the screen? Yes. Now someone has modified, another admin has modified the permissions of this folder, and by mistake or intentionally, now everyone have access to corp data inside of my organization. Now that's just the tip of the iceberg. Now, why do I say that this is just the tip of the iceberg? Because Microsoft has this concept called subfolders within a folders, and when you have subfolders or child folders, you have a concept called permission inheritance, which means if you think corp data is the parent folder and these to be the child folders of corp data, now these child folders can either inherit permission from corp data as such, or the inheritance can be set to false, right? So if I want to know who has access to all these folders, it's not enough for me to just have a look at the permissions here and see, oh, all right, now everyone have access to corp data. It's not just that. I'll have to do this exercise on every folder. Right-click Property Security, right-click Property Security on every folder. This is going to be a bit of a problem, especially when the inheritance is set to true on certain folders and false on certain others, right? So how do you understand the permission, and how do you clean up such inappropriate permissions that are vested on such shared folders, especially the confidential ones? Now pick at least 5 folders soon after this webinar is over, top 5 shared folders, and understand the permission That's the first part. And please clean up the inappropriate ones. Now, how do you understand the permissions? Go to reports, go to NTFS reports, go to permission for folders. Now, select the folder that you're trying to actually understand the permissions for, which is inside of one of my file servers here. And I select the share, which is corp data. I hit OK. And I'm trying to understand the permissions of not just corp data, but also the folders within corp data. I have 5 folders, so I'm trying to understand the permissions of all these 5 folders too. So I'm just going to select 5 subfolders level, or let's say all subfolders, and then I do generate. Now this gives me the list of permissions on the selected folder and all its subfolders in its entirety. There you go. Okay. If I just hit advanced, I not only get the list of permissions on corp data and who has access and what level of access, I also get details on the subfolders or child folders right here. Okay. So after understanding that these are the users who have access to my information, now I'm going to clean up the mess, for which I jump from the Reports tab to the AD Management tab, and then I go to File Server Management. I'm trying to modify the permission on a shared folder. The folder that I'm trying to clean up is corp data. Okay, I select corp data here. Now, I just want the finance managers to be able to access corp data, just that, okay? Finance Manager Security Group. Okay, I have it right here. Finance Managers USA. I hit OK, and I want them to have just read access, just that, okay? Not any other branched permissions, just read access. Done. And I want them to be able to access all the folders, so I do this folder, subfolders, and files, and I hit allow. Okay, I can add another entry or as many entries as I want, but for now it's just going to be a finance manager, so I just do that. There's another way of doing it. You can also do a copy from folder. Let's say you have a backup of corp data. You can also copy permissions from corp data. So if you just take a look here, I have corp data that I'm trying to clean up, but I also have a backup. So if you want to copy permissions from the backup with the inherited permissions, the minute you hit OK, all the permissions will be pasted here. Okay, but I have still not removed the existing entries on corp data, the one that I'm trying to clean up. So this checkbox does the cleanup for me in one shot. Okay, remove all existing permissions and apply only the ones that are defined here. Select the second checkbox. Have a preview. It's always good to have a preview of the changes that you're about to make. Understand the existing permission, know what's the new permission that you're about to set, know what is modified, and also what is removed. After understanding everything, you can then hit modify. All right. So this is how you actually clean up permissions on inappropriate folders. Please generate these queries. I hope these will give you some information that you weren't expecting, such as inappropriate group nesting or let's say confidential folders opened up to inappropriate users. Now the third one that I wanted to share is, have you ever thought of this scenario? You create user accounts in Active Directory, and if you're an administrator who has the habit of having a common password for all the new accounts that you create, and you enable a check flag inside of Active Directory which reads force user to change the password at next log on. So what the users do is they log into Active Directory first day with password at 123 or a common password, and they'll be forced to then change the password. So they customize the password, they change it, they set a secure password, they just carry on with the process. Now, have you ever ran a query inside of Active Directory to understand whether there are any users that you have created inside of Active Directory but have never logged on? Because those are highly vulnerable accounts. Let me tell you why. Okay, so I've created 3 accounts here. Okay, none of these accounts have ever logged in, no login even once. Okay, but what is the password for all these accounts? It's the same password. And after they log in, they'll be forced to change their password. The problem with such accounts is if you leave these accounts unmonitored or unattended. So what I do here is if I'm an attacker, I scan your Active Directory infrastructure in order to find out whether the users have logged in or not. Okay. Now, which attribute do I query in order to understand whether a user has performed an Active Directory authentication or not? I look at the last logon and the last logon timestamp. If the value for those two attributes of that chosen user is 0, what that means is the user has not logged in even once, right? Now, the second thing that I would like to confirm even before starting my attack chain is I wouldn't attack immediately, but I'd like to also understand when was the account created. Was the account created yesterday, which is the 5th of March 2019, or was the account created sometime last year or even the year before? So I would be very much interested in this account number 1, account number 2, and I would not touch this account because the chances of this account logging in is highly is very high. Okay, so I'm not going to touch this account. So the first account that I'd like to compromise is the account that has not logged in even once and was created sometime in August 2017. And what makes things even more easier for me or interesting for me is these accounts are still enabled in Active Directory. And by any chance, if the user belongs to any, let's say, an elevated group inside of Active Directory, that's a jackpot for me. So please scan your Active Directory infrastructure in order to understand whether you have never logged on accounts. I understand that you have other forms of authentication enabled for users like email authentication, or you have your vendors who just use smart cards to check in, check out. All that is there, but what I'm saying is please use this query as a baseline. So if you have 9 users in your report that says never logged on since Jan 2018, and I want you to check whether those 9 users have any other forms of authentication enabled in your infrastructure. If no, please go ahead and disable them immediately, right? So how do you run a query? Okay, go to reports, go to users never logged on, and generate. Okay, so now I have 29 users who have never logged on. And if you just have a look at the account status here, so James Smith, okay, was created sometime in May 2018, and this is the timestamp. The last logon is 0, which means the user has never logged in even once. If the user has logged in today at 10, I would have 10 o'clock here. And unfortunately, the account is still unhandled, which means the account is still in an enabled state, right? So if this user, James Smith, is part of any top-level security groups, this is the first account that I would pick as an attacker. And I know the password that you are using for newly created accounts, and I would wait until I get hold of the right account, which is the third account according to me, and start my attack chain. So if you have such accounts inside of Active Directory, the first thing that I want you to do is select these accounts, disable them immediately. Okay? I don't want you to delete them, please disable them. And I want you to move them to a different organizational unit. Okay, just hit move and go. Move them to any organizational unit that you want. Maybe you can call it a never logged on OU or a temp OU, right? Move these users to a different organizational unit. And please, if you have an auditing solution in your infrastructure, track that specific organizational unit or container or OU for logon success or logon failures. Because you have such accounts, what if 2 months down the lane you sense a sudden VPN activity from James Smith? And if you're not auditing it, it might be trouble or it might cause trouble, right? So please go ahead and run this query and see whether you have any users popping up. Third topic is something related to automation. Okay, I'm just going to be talking about you can automate any stuff that you want. You can automate user creation. You can automate user deprovisioning. I'm going to be talking about an interesting case here. Okay, any Active Directory infrastructure has 2 types of objects. One, active objects, and number 2 is inactive objects. Now, when does an object become inactive? When that specific object does not do any function inside of Active Directory for, let's say, 100 days or 3 months or 6 months or a year, but still is there inside of Active Directory, that's when you call it inactive, right? So you have users who have logged in and who have been with you and who have never logged in for the last 6 months. Okay, you have computers that have not been authenticated, that is part of your network or that is part of your domain, but has not authenticated in the last 120 days or let's say 6 months. You have groups, empty groups inside of Active Directory, top security groups with no members in them, test groups, temp groups, right? So resource groups which do not have any resources in them. So find out all such objects inside of Active Directory once in every 180 days and auto scan your Active Directory and sequentially remove them from Active Directory because they could be potential points of compromise. Okay, so please automate the process. This is how you can automate the process inside of Active Directory. This is for users. You can apply the same methodology for computers groups as well. So ADManager Plus scans your Active Directory and looks out for inactive users who have not logged in for the last, let's say, 6 months or 1 year or 30 days. You specify the time period. And then, according to the logic that I have built in, it disables the users immediately, inactive users, and it moves those disabled users to a different organizational unit. Okay. Now, those disabled users, after Y days, let's call it 180 days, or let's say a year, their accounts are deleted from Active Directory. Not immediate deletion, but after, let's say, a year. The accounts are deleted in Active Directory. The accounts are deleted in Office 365, and their license is revoked. Their Exchange mailbox is deleted. Now you have a cleaned up Active Directory with no loopholes right here. Okay. When you say automation, you can also create your custom logic. You're going to first move users, remove them from groups, disable them, wait for 60 days, delete or disable the mailbox. Specify the logic or create your own logic and then automate the process of user creation, cleanup, user deprovisioning. Okay. Now, any automation that I truly believe that any automation that you perform has to be controlled. Okay. So when I say controlled, so if you say that the users are going to be disabled and the users are going to be deleted, if you do not want the automation to disable users directly in Active Directory, instead, when the automation is about to disable users, you want it to raise a request to you. When it's about to delete users, you want it to raise a request to you, saying, hey, I'm about to delete 10 users. Do you want me to proceed? Now, you just have a look at those 10 users. When you feel that the 10 users can be deleted, you just hit execute. Else, you remove the users from the automation and then proceed with the ones that can be deleted. Okay. Now, the fourth and the last topic, okay, is going to be delegation. Okay. There are two ways of delegating actions in Active Directory. You can pick a user, add a user to a security group, and so that the technician will be able to perform actions in Active Directory. Or you can go with the delegation of control wizard inside of Active Directory. Now select a user or a group and specify the action so that that user will be able to perform the action that you want inside of the specific OU. Okay. Now these two methods elevate the user's right inside of Active Directory. Now we in ADManager Plus don't want that to happen for various good reasons. So what we do here is we have something called task controllers inside of Active Directory. Let me quickly show you how that looks. Okay, so ADManager, go to Delegation, open up Help Desk roles. So let's say you create a new role, and then now the role looks something like this. Okay, it has all the actions that you would like to delegate to a help desk technician or your HR. Okay, you can just pick and choose any options that you want. If you want them to do reports, yes, you can give them reports too. If you want them to perform a bit of administration, yes. If you want them to deal with Office 365, yes, you can do that too. Now, this is something called as a help desk role, or simply a role instead of Active Directory. I'm sorry, instead of ADManager. After creating a role, you then map this role to a technician. Okay, you add a new technician, select a user or a group, and then you specify the role, or you map the role that you have delegated to them. And if you want that role to be applicable only to certain OUs, not all of them, you can filter OUs right here and you hit save. Now, after hitting save, I'm going to log in as a technician and then show you how the screen actually changes here. So I just hit sign out. Okay, I have already created a technician, so I'm logging in as a technician here, and this technician is just supposed to be creating user accounts in Active Directory. So, okay, I do this, and please note that this is not an application account. This is Windows authentication, Windows username, Windows password, and I'm logging into my domain. Okay, I'm logging in via my domain credentials. So I just hit login. Okay. Now, please note that there's a world of a difference in the screen for an administrator and a help desk technician, or HR for that matter. You do not have reports here. You do not have workflow, automation, or any stuff, just an option to create a user account. And I told you that the layout can be customizable. So if I just go to create a single user, and you can restrict the user per template. So based on the template that is applied, the layout will be customizable. So if you want just 5 fields for this user to be visible, you can create a template, map it by default for the user account so that the user account will not be able to perform anything else apart from the ones that you have delegated. Now, the benefits of going with the delegation model inside of ADManager Plus is, if you are mapping a role for a user account inside of ADManager Plus, okay? If you're mapping a role, it can be any role for that matter. It can be a role for creating users, super admin, or reset password. You are not altering the technician's right or the user's right in Active Directory, unlike the ones that you saw here, okay? The user's right in Active Directory will still remain the same. They will not have access to your Active Directory users and computers. They will not have access to other OUs. You restrict them the way you want, and you can also audit the actions done by your technicians. You also have an audit set up right here, okay? Audit the actions for any time period that you want, and also archive the logs for later retrieval. So this model is what I suggest to be a non-intrusive delegation model, where the user permissions are untouched because they're not logging into Active Directory users and computers. They're logging into ADManager Plus for performing the actions. Okay, I told you we can also audit the actions. So these are the 4 topics that we discussed today. One was to bring in standardization, and the other one is 4 important queries that you need to generate, and what are the things that you can automate or you should automate, and also how do you delegate stuff without touching the user's permissions inside of Active Directory. ADManager Plus is an integral part of AD360, which is a module which has few other modules as well. If you're looking at an IAM solution, then I would suggest that you give a try for AD360, which has ADManager and few other modules. So if you have any doubts related to this topic, or if you want more cases, please feel free to drop an email to me. I'd be more than happy to help you, right? It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for your time and patience. You have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.